A couple of years ago, I was invited, there was a gathering of religious leaders and scientists on this topic at the White House under the previous administration and the State Department, and I was just astonished by how many references to Laudato Si were made by people who are secular, people who are of other religious faiths, people in politics, scientists, and I was really inspired and encouraged, and I had a lot of hope at that time that this was going to be that booster shot that would bring together scientists and others, environmental activists, religious leaders, religious practitioners. And yet, at this moment, to be honest, I feel not despair, but I feel like that was a step forward, but now we're kind of a step back again. What are your thoughts, just to, as we're getting ready to ask more questions, any of you three, about where do we stand right now? Laudato Si, it's been about 2 years, and what are your thoughts on is it kind of fading, or what can we do to keep this momentum going?
Well, I think you had an amazing example in what Nancy Tuckman is doing at Loyola. And those conferences convene the Jesuits, usually a scientist and a theologian from all across the country. So I think that's hugely positive. You know, civil rights took a long, long time. And we had a program in this country that said separate but equal. It's all going to work out. And it was when the moral power of religions got involved, especially Martin Luther King, and said, no, there's a moral issue here. We have not yet elevated the moral issue of the environment, and that's what the encyclical does. So it's going to take time. Education is going to be a key part of it, but policy people and scientists realize it's important. Our school had a huge conference on this. Yale is a very secular place. So I have hope over time. It's not going to be in 2 years.
And even then, with civil rights, we still have to work for that.
Exactly.
So this is going to be an ongoing thing. We have 10 minutes. We're going to conclude today at 20 till. So 10 minutes for questions. I see a hand right over here to my right, and another one a little bit in front of that.
I'd really like to thank you all for these wonderful presentations. And in terms of the conference as a whole, we've been communicating with words and numbers and images, but primarily words and their symbols that we hope that we understand. And I would like to ask everyone to, probably most of you have read or seen the Lord of the Rings films or Tolkien's great work. One of his creations were the Ents, who or tree shepherds, and they had very long words to describe things. Mm-hmm. And of course, we're all busy modern people, and we speak in sound bites, and y'all have to talk to the media. But I'd really like to ask everyone to think about terminology that can become epithets. And the example I'd like to use is pro-life and pro-choice, because I don't think there's been anything more destructive to our understanding of these issues than those little soundbite words that put people behind walls and fences.
Any comment or reply?
Well, I'll be happy to look at that. I think one of the things that we try to do is to make pro-life being about all of life. And I know the word is problematic, but it's also, for my community and many communities, very recognizable. And I think moving the direction that we see that the Pope did with Catholic social teaching, with the National Association of Evangelicals, everyone, even Focus on the Family, all changing their definition of pro-life to being about whole life. It's much more winsome, and it's going to take some work. And, I believe we have a biblical responsibility to care about all life. But it also, at the same time, for our community, it helps to make inroads into our community about making it a life issue. So I understand your question, but I want to take terms. It's like the word evangelical today. I am despondent over so many people that have used the name that I call myself for purposes of political power. And so I could change the name and not be an evangelical anymore, or I could fight to reclaim it, which I'm going to do. And I think that's the same position I have on pro-life. I want to make pro-life about protecting all of life at every stage. And so I'm going to fight to make that happen, and maybe it might be an uphill battle, but that's the way I am and who I am, and I think who God called me to be.
I think we also have to pay attention to India and China as the greatest populations on the planet, which is why we were trying to involve them in these conferences and so on, and to realize they have their own cultural approaches to this. So I think this is why pluralism really matters and why thinking in a worldwide context matters. Do you want to jump in?
Well, this is a minefield, right, to talk about this. I think that any of these, the term pro-life, pro-choice, both are loaded, but I do think there's a feminist perspective on this, which we're not going to do today, but I think it's very important to keep in mind. But I would like to say something briefly about Laudato Si and that traction. So I've been doing eco-theology a long time, and in the early days, there were very few people who could make the connections, and now it's a really robust field in every faculty of theology all over the world. So I look at Laudato Si and I think maybe people aren't using the document as much as we hoped. However, this conference, among many others, is that blend of religion, science, policy, economics, and that's the way forward. And so I think it's growing this way, it's growing exponentially. And the other thing I would point to is that the number of people who use Laudato Si who have nothing to do with religion, have nothing to do with I mean, they understand there's a moral, spiritual imperative from whatever framework they are. So, I mean, I don't think it's because it's a papal Catholic document that it's got traction. I think it's the integral ecology. I think it's flexible and it's workable and it's attractive.
Yeah,
And
I'm sorry.
No, done.
I just wanted to mention as well, we have a lot of the Catholic sisters sitting here, and they've been the heartbeat
Yes.
of this approach of integral ecology for a long time. Yes, I think
Very
absolutely. Praise be to you. And another big shout out to Dan Mishloff of the Catholic Climate Covenant based in Washington, D.C., but I'm sure that there'll be some follow-up on the important work that you're doing as well. So there are communities moving this forward.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Molly Freebairn. I'm with Show Me Solar, and I work in Jefferson City, Missouri. And I've been to a lot of climate change and renewable energy conferences. And this is the first one that has really seriously brought in the spiritual underpinnings and, you know, the nature and the creation. That's the, you know, the underlying meaning and source of all of our joys in life and all of our difficulties that we're facing now and the conflicts and really trying to struggle with them. I guess the one word that I am thinking of that is awareness, that came especially from your last talk showing the Zen spiritual places that you visited on the other side of the planet and how they've become so degraded over just, you know, less than our lifetime. And I feel, and you know, I think one of the purposes of this conference is just to get us all to a higher awareness and struggling to resolve these issues.
Yeah. I
And-
appreciate that, and
Yes.
let me just respond quickly and make sure we get a couple other questions.
Yeah.
Two-thirds of the world's people live in Asia.
Yeah.
You know, this is why we've got to understand their
Yes.
thinking, their culture. And a shout out to Peter Raven, who's tried to bring up the issue of population and so on, especially at the Vatican. So
Yeah.
maybe there's another question emerging.
Let me-
Well, the
I like to-
question that I have, very quickly, that I put to Peter Raven, and he didn't say no. So I've asked if we could draft a resolution coming from the summit and all the signatories and participants that want to, you know, sign on, review and agree and sign on to it, that, you know, would state, whereas the Pope has asked.
Why don't we let Peter Raven respond to that in the final session here?
Yeah.
Okay?
Sure.
'Cause you
And
put
we'll
it-
discuss
Thank
it.
you.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
let's hear what
Thank
Thanks
you.
very
Peter will
much.
say.
We've got about 3 to 4 more minutes, so a
Yeah.
couple more questions.
Can I respond real quickly to the statement on spirituality? One of the things that gives me hope, and you're talking about faith and spirituality, is this October, probably an unlikely place for many people in this room, but Evangel University in Springfield is going to be testing an entire week of creation care conferences. I'll be there. Catherine Hayhoe will be there. So, you know, it's one of the things that's really moving in my world is that this awareness is there. And so, you know, it's a good connection to spirituality.
Very good.
Next question.
I have a question. Okay, so over the past year, I've been to several different churches and different church services, several different Catholic church, Lutheran church, and an evangelical church here in St. Louis. And I love and I'm hopeful when I hear, you know, from the top down, but never once at any of those services, and I go almost every Sunday, have I heard anybody talk about the environment. So when is it going to come to the people?
When we have a change of leadership. That's what Cardinal Turkson said. They included all the bishops in Laudato Si, but the challenge is for the bishops to respond to Laudato Si. But you know, there's a thing called energy that will change leadership over time. And when we have different leadership, the young people, as we saw this morning, are going to change this.
I also think that the people in the pews should demand it. You know, speak up, demand it.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think that the call is the resources are there, and the people need to tell their pastors and others that this is an issue that they want to preach about. I'm preaching about it this Sunday in my home church. So, but, you know, and I'm not the pastor there. I'm just preaching on creation care.
So we've got 2 more minutes. Actually, I heard a reference to it at a bar mitzvah recently in town, and I heard a Catholic priest at my parish refer to it. So it does happen, but we need to also do more training in seminaries and divinity schools, I think, too. 2 more questions, yes.
Okay. First of all, a thank you to everyone who was part of this conference. It is simply amazing. One of the things that I'm aware of through John Deere is that there is work on a new encyclical, and that new encyclical is going to be on nonviolence. And so I just think that the deeper issue for all of us, for myself, is to become more aware of how violent I am to the environment. And that also the nonviolence toward people and just everything. But I think that's the root. You know, the sin is violence, and we have to really ponder on that. So anyway, thank you very much.
That connection is made in Laudato
Yes.
Si.
Yes,
and,
it is.
I am working a little bit on background documents for that. There is a conference coming up at the Vatican on integral ecology and integral peace.
Nice.
And so that connection is being made right now. Any final comments from our 3 panelists here?
Heather did a whole book on.
I went to India a few years ago to study to be with the biggest nonviolent movement for social change, which is called Ekta Parishad, and then I brought leaders from all over the world to Ottawa to ponder nonviolence and education, ecology, gender, arts. So I agree with you. There's not going to be much of a future without nonviolence, and I understand you also work on nonviolence. So it's in a very important direction to go.
Well, let's thank our 3 panelists again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.